In the blistering cold of February 1943, the Eastern Front had become a place where even the air seemed to kill. The snow-covered plains near Belgorod were a graveyard of tanks, twisted steel, and frozen corpses. Soviet T-34s rolled forward in endless columns, their treads crushing the remnants of a retreating German defense. The Wehrmacht's once mighty army was exhausted, half-starved, and fractured by relentless Soviet assaults. But amidst the chaos, one man, a single unknown sniper, turned that hopeless field into a legend. He was known only by whispers, Der Schattenjäger, the Shadow Hunter. No one knew his name, his rank, or even which regiment he came from. He simply appeared one morning on the edge of a forested ridge overlooking a Soviet advance. What happened that day would become one of the strangest, most chilling stories ever told from the Eastern Front. The 5th Guards Tank Corps had been ordered to crush a thin German defensive line protecting the road to Kharkiv. The Soviets were confident. They outnumbered the Germans 3-1, with superior tanks and endless reinforcements. As dawn broke, a dozen T-34s advanced in formation across the snowfield. Behind them, Soviet infantry followed in tight ranks, prepared to sweep the trenches once the armor broke through. But just as the tanks cleared a small ridge, something happened. A sharp crack, a rifle shot, echoed across the field. It wasn't artillery, it wasn't a tank gun. Yet the lead T-34 suddenly shuddered, sputtered, and stopped dead in its tracks. Smoke curled from its engine deck. Before the crew could react, another shot followed, and another tank was hit, struck perfectly in its weak rear armor. Panic rippled through the Soviet line. The commanders shouted, searching for anti-tank positions. But the Germans weren't firing. There was no muzzle flash, no trench-mounted gun, only silence. And then, again, the sound of a single rifle. One by one, the tanks began to die. The hits were impossibly precise, each shot placed at the engine's ventilation grill or fuel intake, the only points vulnerable to a rifle bullet. It was the kind of accuracy that could only come from someone who knew tanks intimately, perhaps even someone who had once driven them. Within 2 hours, 12 Soviet tanks lay burning. By the time the smoke cleared, the mysterious sniper was gone. German infantry who had watched the event were stunned. They searched the nearby tree line, expecting to find an anti-tank team or a hidden gun emplacement. Instead, they found nothing. No tracks, no shell casings, not even footprints in the snow. It was as if the shooter had never existed. Word spread like wildfire through the ranks. Soldiers began calling him the ghost marksman of Belgorod. Some claimed he was a former panzer commander whose unit had been destroyed, now taking revenge with a custom-built rifle. Others whispered darker tales, that he was a deserter who fought only for himself, or a spirit haunting the battlefield. A few days later, Soviet reconnaissance aircraft flew over the area to photograph the wrecks. When analysts examined the images, they noticed something bizarre. Each destroyed tank had been hit exactly once, in the same small spot. Even the Soviet engineers couldn't believe a standard rifle could do such damage. Some suggested experimental ammunition, tungsten core bullets or armor-piercing rounds, but no one could explain how a single man could aim and fire with such precision, undetected, across hundreds of meters. Officially, German headquarters dismissed the reports as exaggerated. The war was filled with rumors, and they had little time for ghost stories. But within the ranks, the legend grew. Troops began carving small black symbols on their helmets, a shadow with a rifle, claiming it brought luck, invoking the ghost sniper's protection. By March 1943, more sightings followed. Units retreating through forests near Kharkiv reported that enemy tanks were suddenly disabled before reaching their lines. The pattern was always the same. Quick shots, perfect accuracy, no visible shooter. Soviet tank crews grew so fearful that some refused to advance through wooded terrain without heavy artillery support. Then, as suddenly as he appeared, the shadow hunter vanished. No more sightings, no more wrecked tanks. His story faded as the war moved westward, replaced by new horrors and battles. After Germany's surrender in 1945, Allied intelligence began combing through captured records. One report from an SS field unit mentioned an unregistered sniper, operating independently on the Eastern Front, a man with an exceptional record of anti-armor kills. The document described his rifle as custom-modified with long-range optics of unknown origin. But the name field was blank, the photo section torn out. Decades later, in 1967, a Soviet historian investigating wartime archives found something that reignited the legend. It was a classified field report from a Red Army division near Belgorod, dated the same week as the infamous tank ambush. The report described a German sniper firing non-standard munitions and striking tank engines with extreme accuracy. Soviet investigators had found fragments of 7.92 mm bullets lodged in several destroyed engines, suggesting the attacker had indeed used a standard rifle, not specialized anti-tank weaponry. But the final paragraph of that report was the most chilling. It stated, "Greater than, search parties followed tracks to a snow-covered ridge where the firing originated. They ended abruptly, as if the shooter had vanished into the air. Some said he died that day, buried by an explosion or covered by collapsing snow. Others believed he had abandoned the war entirely, melting away into the forests of Eastern Europe, living out his days as a hermit." A few fringe researchers proposed something else, that Der Schattenjäger was not one man, but several German marksmen trained under a secret anti-armor sniper program late in 1942. No records of such a program have ever been found, but scattered evidence hints at experimental rifle modifications tested by the Wehrmacht during that period. Whether man, myth, or military secret, the ghost marksman of Belgorod remains one of World War II's most enduring mysteries. Even today, military historians study photos of the 12 destroyed tanks, unable to explain how such precise damage could be inflicted with a rifle of the era. What is certain, however, is this. On one bitter winter morning in 1943, amid the roar of engines and the scream of shells, a lone marksman stood against a column of steel, and won. And when the smoke cleared, he left nothing behind but silence, and a legend that still haunts the snows of the Eastern Front. The man who would become known as Der Schattenjäger, the Shadow Hunter, didn't appear from nowhere, though history tried to erase his footsteps. Whispers within the Wehrmacht hinted that he was once a tank commander himself, an officer whose unit had been wiped out during the disastrous retreat from Stalingrad. His name, they said, was Feldwebel Marcus Keller, a quiet Bavarian who had served in the 14th Panzer Division. Keller's tank, a Panzer IV, had been destroyed in the snow outside of Kalach in January 1943. He had survived only by crawling from the burning wreck and hiding among the frozen bodies of his crew until nightfall. He watched Soviet tanks roll past, dozens of them, their engines rumbling like monsters in the dark. Something in him broke that night. The loss of his men, his machine, and his sense of command twisted into something colder, sharper. Weeks later, a German supply unit discovered a lone figure trudging through the snow, rifle slung over his shoulder, eyes hollow but alert. He said nothing except that he needed ammunition. The soldiers fed him, warmed him, and sent him back toward the front, but he never rejoined his regiment. What happened next remains pieced together only through fragmented testimonies from soldiers who claimed to have seen him. One of them, Corporal Erich Wenzel, described it years later in a letter to a war historian. Greater than, he came to our trench one morning before dawn, wearing a white cloak made from torn parachute silk. He didn't speak much, only asked for a scope and ammunition. His rifle wasn't like ours, it had been modified, with the barrel extended and the stock reinforced. He cleaned it with care, as if it were alive. When the Soviets advanced, he told us to stay down. Then he left the trench and disappeared into the woods. We never saw him again, but that day, the tanks stopped coming. From that moment onward, the legend of the ghost marksman began to take shape. He seemed to know everything about Soviet tanks, where to aim, how they moved, and when they would strike. Unlike typical snipers who targeted infantry or officers, this man went for the engines, the heart of each steel beast. He waited hours in the cold, motionless, until his single shot could cripple a vehicle. Historians later speculated that he might have used 7.92 mm SMK armor-piercing ammunition, capable of penetrating weak armor at close range. But even with such rounds, the precision required to hit the exact vent of a moving T-34 was extraordinary, nearly impossible. And yet, the records of the 5th Guards Tank Corps show 12 confirmed tank losses in a single day near Belgorod, none caused by artillery or anti-tank guns. Each was destroyed by what Soviet engineers described as localized mechanical penetration. As panic spread among the Soviets, German morale on the front line shifted. Troops who had lost faith in the war suddenly believed in this ghostly protector, a silent guardian who appeared when hope was lost. They began painting small white X symbols on their helmets, supposedly representing the sniper's crosshairs. The Wehrmacht command, however, was less enthusiastic. They feared the story could encourage desertion or independent action. Officially, no sniper was ever credited for the attack. The files that mentioned a lone marksman were sealed or destroyed. But soldiers remembered. They spoke of how he moved at night, never sleeping in the same place twice. He avoided officers, rarely spoke, and refused to take food from others. Some claimed he listened to Soviet radio frequencies, predicting attacks before they happened. Others swore he carried a notebook filled with tank sketches and range calculations. In early March 1943, he was reportedly seen again near the Oskol River. There, during another Soviet assault, 4 tanks were destroyed in the same precise manner. Afterward, a German patrol found the remains of a sniper's hide, spent bullet casings laid neatly beside a burned ration tin. No body, no name tag, only a single phrase carved into the wood of a nearby tree. Für die ich verloren habe, for those I lost. That message convinced many that the sniper was indeed Marcus Keller, fighting his own private war, long after his unit and command were gone. What no one could explain, though, was how he managed to survive for months behind shifting lines, unseen by either side, killing tanks with a rifle while the war raged around him. The man they called the Shadow had become more than human. He was a myth written in smoke and steel. Keynote 2. The Vanishing, a legend buried in the snow. By early 1944, the Eastern Front was collapsing. Soviet divisions pushed deep into Ukraine, and the remnants of the German army were in full retreat. Amid the chaos, reports of the mysterious sniper continued to surface, always at the worst moments for the Soviets, always unconfirmed. An intercepted Red Army transmission in February mentioned a German marksman causing engine detonations with precision fire. The message was marked as unverified superstition, yet it described tank casualties that matched the ghost's pattern exactly. Then, suddenly, silence. After the Soviet breakthrough at Kirovograd, no one heard of him again. Not a single soldier, officer, or prisoner ever reported seeing the sniper. His legend, once whispered in awe and fear, simply vanished like breath in winter air. Years later, in 1952, Allied investigators reviewing captured German documents found a sealed report from Abteilung 12, an SS counterintelligence branch. It referenced a rogue sniper, operating outside orders, possessing extraordinary efficiency against enemy armor. The report concluded that the man was to be neutralized or absorbed into sanctioned operations. There was no follow-up file. Was he killed by his own side, recruited into a secret program, or did he simply disappear into the snow once his war was over? The mystery deepened in 1978 when Soviet veterans published memoirs mentioning the incident. One tanker, Captain Viktor Sokolov, recalled seeing a lone figure in white, moving between burning tanks before vanishing into the smoke. He insisted the man could not have escaped the encirclement, yet no body was ever found. For decades, historians tried to piece together his identity. Some argued he was part of Operation Seawolf, a rumored late-war German effort to field elite tank snipers, equipped with experimental weapons. Others dismissed the idea as propaganda or battlefield folklore. But physical evidence surfaced. Fragments of a modified Mauser Kar 98K rifle, discovered in 1991 near Belgorod, buried deep beneath what had once been the front line. The weapon's barrel was longer than standard issue, and the bolt reinforced, suggesting it had been customized for long-range precision. A faint serial number was still legible, K-4719. Cross-referencing German production logs revealed that number had been assigned to a small batch of rifles issued to the 14th Panzer Division, the same unit Marcus Keller served in. That single piece of metal reignited the debate. Could the legend have been real? Was Keller the man who brought down 12 tanks in one day, and then walked into the snow, never to be seen again? No official record bears his name after February 1943, yet scattered among the ruins of history are traces, small, cold fingerprints of a ghost. A white cloak made from parachute silk found near a frozen trench. Spent armor-piercing bullets buried beside melted tank. Remains. And the scrawled message on that wooden tree. Für die ich verloren habe. Whether Keller was a man seeking revenge, a soldier haunted by guilt, or simply a legend that soldiers invented to make sense of impossible events, his story endures for one reason. It reminds us that even in a war of machines, sometimes one man, one rifle, and one act of defiance can echo louder than an entire army. When the snow fell again over Belgorod that winter, it covered everything: the tracks, the tanks, the bodies, and perhaps the last footprints of the shadow hunter himself. No grave, no medal, no memory in the archives. Only silence, and a legend carried by those who survived him. And so the question remains, was Der Schattenjäger ever truly there? Or did war itself conjure him, as a ghost born from vengeance and survival? Whatever the truth, history remembers one thing. 12 tanks burned, one rifle spoke, and then, the world went silent.